Good morning, everyone. So my name is Ashanti Lee, and I'm the Engagement and Communications Assistant at the network. Today we have the New York State Affordable Housing Connectivity Program NetWorkshop, and we are joined by Rose Anello, Director of Outreach at ConnectALL, Vidi Garg, Principal Project Manager at HR and Advisors, and Rebecca Kopnick, Chief Strategy Officer for Portfolio Preservation at the New York State Homes and Community Renewal. This is a webinar, so everyone is muted and off camera. Any questions can be put in the Q&A and they'll be answered live. We also are recording, so if anyone has missed it, they can find the recording on our website. And I will pass it off to Rebecca.
Thanks, Ashanti, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I am Becky Kopnick. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at HCR, and many of you may know me because I oversee our portfolio of affordable housing that HCR has financed, including the 9% portfolio, the 4% portfolio, Mitchell Lamas, and state supervised public housing, and many of your projects fall under my asset management team. So I recognize many of the names, and I'm glad you guys are joining us today. I'm going to walk you through the PowerPoint today. And before I do that, I want to introduce some of my colleagues here. So let's see, Rose Anello has joined from the ConnectALL office at ESD. We've got Vidi Garg, who is consulting to ESD on this project and is an expert in all things broadband. And then you guys already know Cynthia, obviously. And then just want to give a special thanks to Ashanti for organizing everyone today and making all of this happen. So thank you very much for that. And we can go ahead and start the presentation. All right, so hopefully everyone can see Rose's screen. Why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, so just some housekeeping items before we get started. So I think you all saw that the session's being recorded and you will get access to these slides afterwards. We're going to be posting links and announcements in the chat. And we'll also send out any links that are shared today by email. You can post any of your questions in the Q&A feature under Zoom, and we'll get to those at the end of the conversation. And then if you have more questions after the webinar is over, there is a Q&A on the ConnectALL website at broadband.ny.gov. Where you can learn a lot more about the program and get answers to specific questions if you could think of something afterwards. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so today I'm going to just walk you through a little bit about the partnership between HCR and the ConnectALL team at ESD. But most of the time today is going to be spent on giving you an overview of the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program, the broadband program we're talking about today. We're talking a little bit about what properties are eligible and how to participate in the survey that folks who are interested need to fill out to kick off the process. And then we'll take Q&A and we'll talk about what comes next. Okay, so folks may remember that back in 2022, the governor announced the creation of the ConnectALL office at ESD. And this office was created to implement the $1 billion broadband initiative to bring reliable high-speed broadband to all New Yorkers. And this money is federal funds, and they are being implemented by my colleagues at the ConnectALL office. And we at HCR are here to support them in this and do outreach and answer questions. And obviously, because one of their programs, which is called the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program, is focused on specifically on affordable housing and public housing and making sure that residents of these properties have access to high quality internet. And so HCR is obviously very interested in supporting this initiative, high-speed broadband is, so critical. It's basically a utility these days. Just like heat and hot water, people really need access to the internet to be able to do so many parts of their lives. We want to make sure that the residents who live on our properties are not being left behind. Next slide. Great. So when the federal money came down the road, Broadband Office and NISAFA, I think with the help of Shinny, did some work looking at the need for broadband access in affordable housing. And none of this is going to be a surprise to you all because you work in these communities every day. But 1/3 of New York households that have incomes below $35,000 a year do not have a home broadband subscription and are probably just relying on their phones if they have them. Almost 1 million New Yorkers do not subscribe to a broadband service. And then almost 3% of folks in New York State, areas in New York State are unserved, meaning that they don't have a wireless provider offering the kind of speeds that you need to effectively use the internet. So there really is, even though internet is so ubiquitous in the state, we still have many gaps in coverage, and this program is really there to make sure, like I said before, that the communities that we serve and our buildings and our residents are getting access to high-speed internet. Next slide. So after looking at this data, the administration decided to dedicate part of the federal funds that we have received to advance broadband, specifically to affordable housing properties and low-income residents. So New York State has received $100 million from the Treasury Department to deploy broadband to 100,000 units of affordable housing. Again, focused on serving low-income communities and helping with getting access to employment, education, and healthcare services. And the way this is going to work is that the ConnectALL office, working with the team here at HCR, is granting funds directly to internet service providers or ISPs, folks like Verizon and others, and they are going to deploy broadband and high-speed broadband to affordable housing properties. So one of the great things I would just say about this delivery mechanism is that you all don't need to worry about how you're going to receive these funds, about federal compliance, about signing a regulatory agreement, blah, blah, blah. Like all of that, all the funds are flowing to the internet service provider who will be matched with one of your properties if you are interested in. And so all of that sort of like administrative overhead that we're also familiar with federal funds does not come to you, which I think is fantastic. The next slide. So how does this work? So as I said, the ConnectALL office is going to match pre-approved internet service providers with owners of affordable housing like you all, and as well as public housing authorities and others who have expressed interest in this program through the online survey that I think some of you have taken, but everyone should fill out. That's at broadband.ny.gov. So again, the eligible grantees for the funds are the internet service providers, but they are, this $100 million is specifically to be used in affordable housing and public housing, and to do the fiber and broadband connections in your properties, and then to do any in-building equipment and wiring retrofits that are necessary. Okay, so when is this all going to happen? It's happening right now is the short answer to this, but you can see on this slide what the timeline is here. So the ConnectALL team spent last year and some of this year working on program design and doing outreach to try to create a pipeline of affordable housing for this property. And then starting this year, they are matching the internet service providers with property. We'll be doing this for the next 2 years. All the funds need to be spent by 2026. So there is, with all sort of stimulus funds, there's sort of a short timeline here. So they're really focusing on going ahead and getting properties matched with providers to get work started in properties. Grants are being awarded starting now. Internet service providers some have already been qualified. It's a rolling application process. And then they'll be doing just deploying the infrastructure and doing the work in buildings this year, next year, leading into 2026. And then service will be available starting next year. So we'll talk a little bit about who is eligible for this. A range of properties are available or eligible for this. And I would imagine that probably I took a quick look at the list of folks who are coming. And I think basically all of your properties will be eligible, but we can, if you feel like you have something that I'm not mentioning here, we can talk about that. So some examples are, anything that has received 4% or 9%, an allocation of 4% or 9% tax credits, either through us at HCR or HPD, anything with a 420C tax incentive, anything with home funds, if you have any 202s or 811s, those are eligible, as well as any of the sort of legacy HUD programs, 221D3s, a 236. Mitchell Llamas are eligible. Anything with project-based Section 8 contract is eligible. Anything with a PRAC is eligible from HUD, Project Rental Assistance Contract, for those of you who don't breathe the alphabet soup of HUD programs. And then public housing is available as well. Again, if you think that you own, a legacy HUD property or, some interesting configuration that, HCR, HPD came up with at some point that you don't see on here, please, let us know and we can let you dig into that and see if that is eligible. But this is meant to be, this is not an exhaustive list. This is meant to be inclusive and really get to the folks that we all serve. All right. Next. All right, so how do you participate? So the application process for this program has been streamlined. And so if you took a look like 6 months or a year ago and got overwhelmed, you should come back and take a look because it's really been streamlined significantly. So the first step is to fill out the building conditions self-assessment survey. And this is, the link is right here. And this is really where you indicate interest and provide some building specific information so that the ConnectALL team can effectively match you with an internet service provider and kind of have some sense of the configuration of your building and the kind of work that needs to be done there. The ConnectALL office, once you submit this, the ConnectALL office reviews these submissions weekly, so there's a fast turnaround time, and we'll match you with an internet service provider. And then if you have questions about the survey or get stuck, they do have a third party called Civics, which is their outreach partner that you can call or email, and the email address and the phone number are here if you get stuck as you are filling out this survey. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit sort of like what this survey looks like. So to access the survey, you go to the Affordable Housing Connect Program's webpage. Again, the URL is right up there. And you click on the building conditions self-assessment. And you can see here that they have YouTube recordings and presentations so that you can see sort of how to fill it out. Next slide. Great. Okay. So I would give sort of a few hints on tips on this page for how to fill out this survey. So first, the link to the full set of survey questions is embedded in the survey introduction, and you can click where you see in yellow on this page where it says review the survey questions here. you can look at all of them and print them out and get a sense of like what kind of information you are going to need to provide. And I think for a lot of this information, it's really helpful to have your building super or the architect that you work with, your building staff generally available to answer some of these questions. It's not going to necessarily be something that an administrator, unless they're very involved in the inner workings of the building, is going to be able to fill out. You will complete one survey for each property. And in this instance, a property can be multiple buildings, as long as they're sort of like, so for example, if you came to HCR and did like a cluster of buildings and had one tax credit allocation for them, and they're sort of managed, they're geographically proximate and managed as a whole, that would be sort of one cluster of buildings that you would fill out a survey for. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as I said, you're going to have to gather some information. So make sure you're talking to your property managers, contractors, architects, and other people who are aware of the workings of your property. The survey is going to request for information about the buildings in your property. So how many and how big they are, how many units, how many floors, square footage, rooftop access. It's going to ask about the affordability of the property in terms of what program is it under, the number of affordable units versus maybe market units. Again, for this group, it's probably all affordable, but for some other groups, it could be a mix. Any plans that you might have for renovation in the next 2 years, and then very importantly, the electrical services available at the property. So does each unit already have a connection to internet infrastructure? Does the building already have fiber, copper, coaxial? Sort of what the existing conditions are in terms of internet access at the property. So those are the 4 buckets of things that you will be asked about. Next slide. Okay. So this is just sort of like a snapshot of section 2, which begins with the request for owners to provide property location information, and also ask about property affordability. This is all pretty straightforward. I assume we all know the address and location of our properties. Next slide. And then section 3 goes into some of the things I was saying about general property information, sort of what kind of, what are you interested in receiving in terms of broadband infrastructure upgrades to the property? How would you describe, the quality of internet access you already have at the property, so they sort of know what they're getting into going into this. Next section. And then, these are a lot of questions. And so if at some point you feel like you've sort of, you need to go talk to someone to get some more information, you can save your survey results and continue later. You can see in the upper right-hand corner of this gray box, it says save and continue later. And you'll enter your email address, and then you get a unique link to access your survey when you're able to come back to it. And you can also use this link to update the survey later on. Okay, so as you're filling out the survey, again, if you have questions or you get stuck, you can reach out to the ConnectALL team's outreach partner, which is Civics, and they can provide technical assistance either over email or over the phone. Again, the numbers to reach Civics are here, as well as their email address at Gmail. I think those are being put in the chat. So you can reach out to those folks at any time and request assistance as you are filling this out. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit now about sort of how, once you filled this out, how you would be matched with an internet service provider, sort of the roles and responsibilities. So first, the match between the internet service provider and the property is based on the quality of the internet service provider's approach and how it matches up with yours, and then sort of the property-specific deployment plans. And you will have the opportunity to review the deployment plan before you enter into an agreement with the internet service providers. It's not like someone's just going to show up one day, and you have the opportunity to meet them and review the plans and make sure that they are acceptable. And then if you're already working with an internet service provider and you have an existing relationship, please, there's a place in the survey to let the ConnectALL office know that, and they can reach out to the internet service provider if they haven't already submitted an application to the program, and encourage them to do so that you can maintain that relationship going forward. Okay, so based on the responses, the ConnectALL office is going to assemble portfolios of affordable housing within the 15 sort of green metropolitan areas you can see on this map, to try to get to some economies of scale and lower costs in terms of installation, and reach as many households as possible. Now, these are the prioritized areas, but if you have properties outside these areas in Delaware County or St. Lawrence or Wyoming or wherever you have it, you still should apply, and they can be wrapped into a portfolio nearby, depending on the number of units there. This is sort of the general how things will be, how properties will be grouped to match an internet service provider. Okay. So how will properties be prioritized for this program? So first and foremost, you have to submit the building conditions self-assessment survey that we went through. The ConnectALL office will also look at some data from the FCC that demonstrates if a property is unserved, underserved, served, it doesn't really have a choice in terms of what kind of service they get. They'll also look at the length of time your property will remain affordable and under regulation. So again, for you all, most of you stay affordable for the long haul, but in other situations, you might not want to install something in the building that's going to opt out in a year. And then they're also going to look at the proportion of units reserved for low-income households under the regulatory agreement. Again, for this group, it's a little less relevant, but this comes into play in a mixed income context. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about sort of who's going to do what once you are matched with an internet service provider. So their responsibility is going to be designating a point of contact for you for each property. They're going to create your property-specific broadband deployment plan that you will get to review. They'll enter into an agreement with you, sort of stating what they're going to do and what the scope of work is. And they are responsible for coordinating all of the activities on site with you. They're also responsible for, as much as possible, limiting disruption to residents and communicating the plans with you in advance if someone's going to be coming into the apartment and doing some work, and then returning the property and any units that they enter in a broom clean state and repairing any damage at the end of each day. They will also be maintaining the infrastructure and the equipment over the long haul and providing ongoing customer support as people are accessing the internet, and then doing marketing to tenants and supporting broadband adoption and digital literacy at your property. So I think this is like a really important part of this, is that they're just not going to come and install, but they're going to be an ongoing resource, both to make sure that the equipment works and to help the tenants navigate having broadband perhaps for the first time. Okay, so what do your responsibilities include? You will be responsible for designating a point of contact for the ConnectALL team and the internet service provider. You will enter into an agreement with the internet service provider once you've reviewed it. And then you'll provide building access to the internet service provider as necessary based on the schedule that you work out with them. So again, most of the onus for this program is on the internet service provider. So we got through that relatively quickly. Look, I would just say it is not often that people show up and offer affordable housing free money outside of a normal recapitalization process. So I think this program is enormously needed and hopefully very helpful to your residents, to your properties. And with that, we are happy to take any questions that you may have.